Welcome to the Life Paradox, where reality is stranger than fiction. Rain pounded the windshield of Marcus Reed's aging sedan as he squinted through the darkness, trying to make out the road ahead. The wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, each sweep providing only moments of clarity before the glass became obscured again. It was nearly midnight, and Marcus was exhausted after a double shift at the construction site, his shoulders aching with the familiar pain of physical labor. At 36, Marcus had grown accustomed to long drives home, alone. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, leaving him with nothing but a few boxes of possessions, a stack of bills, and a silence that seemed to follow him everywhere. The radio droned quietly, a late-night talk show discussing topics that couldn't penetrate his weariness. When the flashing hazard lights appeared in the distance, Marcus almost didn't register them at first. A car was pulled over on the shoulder, partially visible through the curtain of rain. He instinctively eased off the accelerator, peering through the storm to assess the situation. There had been a time when he wouldn't have hesitated to stop, but recent years had hardened him, taught him to mind his own business. People had their own problems. He certainly had his. "Not my concern," he muttered, fingers tightening on the steering wheel as he prepared to drive past. But something made him glance again at the stranded vehicle. Through the rain-streaked window of the other car, he caught a glimpse of a woman's face illuminated by the glow of a cell phone screen. She appeared to be distressed, her features contorted in what looked like pain. And then he noticed something else, her rounded belly, visible even from his passing vantage point. Every paradox begins with a question. If you love unraveling life's biggest mysteries, hit subscribe and join the Life Paradox, where every story bends reality. Marcus felt the familiar internal tug-of-war. The cynical voice cultivated by years of disappointment told him to keep driving. Someone else would stop, someone with fewer burdens and more goodwill to spare. But another voice, one he hadn't heard from in a long time, reminded him of who he used to be. With a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, Marcus checked his mirrors and pulled over, positioning his car about 20 feet ahead of the stranded vehicle. He reached for the umbrella tucked beneath his seat, though he knew it would offer little protection against the sideways rain. Flicking on his own hazard lights, he stepped out into the storm. Wind immediately whipped the umbrella inside out, rendering it useless. Cursing under his breath, Marcus abandoned it and jogged back to the stranded car, rain soaking through his work clothes within seconds. He knocked on the passenger window, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible, to the woman inside. The window lowered partially, revealing the face he had glimpsed earlier. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd thought, mid-20s perhaps, with dark hair plastered to her forehead by sweat despite the chill outside. "Are you okay?" Marcus had to shout to be heard over the storm. "My car just died," she replied, her voice tight with strain. "And I think I'm in labor." Those words sent a jolt of panic through Marcus's chest. "How far along are you?" "Nearly 9 months." Her face contorted again, and she let out a low moan that made Marcus's heart race. "The contractions started about an hour ago. My phone's dead, and I was trying to make it to my sister's house when the car just stopped." Marcus glanced up and down the deserted highway. No other cars had passed since he'd stopped. The nearest hospital was at least 30 minutes away in good weather. "I'll drive you to the hospital," he said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. "Can you walk to my car?" She nodded, visibly relieved. "Between contractions, yes. I'm Elena, by the way." "Marcus," he replied, opening her door and offering his arm for support. "Let's get you somewhere safe." As they slowly made their way to his car, rain pelting them mercilessly, Marcus wondered what he was getting himself into. This wasn't his problem. Yet somehow, in that moment, it had become his responsibility. a strange turn of events that would alter the course of his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. The windshield wipers worked furiously as Marcus navigated the flooded highway, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Elena sat beside him, eyes closed, focusing on her breathing during the brief reprieves between contractions. The dashboard. Clock read 12:23, each minute stretching with tension. "How far apart are they?" Marcus asked, trying to remember what little he knew about childbirth from friends who had become parents. "About 7 minutes," Elena replied, her voice strained. "But getting closer together." She shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, one hand protectively cradling her belly. "I didn't expect... It's too early. 2 more weeks until my due date." Marcus nodded, eyes fixed on the road as he swerved around a fallen branch. "First baby?" "Yes." She managed a weak smile. "Didn't exactly plan on bringing her into the world like this." "Her? You're having a girl?" Elena nodded, then winced as another contraction began. Marcus watched helplessly from the corner of his eye as she gripped the door handle, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. The contraction lasted nearly a minute before her body relaxed again. "What about the father?" Marcus asked, immediately regretting the question when he saw Elena's expression harden. "Not in the picture," she said flatly. "Left when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility." She absently twisted a thin silver ring on her right hand. Story as old as time, right? Marcus felt an unexpected surge of anger toward this unknown man. His own father had walked out when Marcus was just 4, leaving his mother to raise him and his younger brother alone. The absence had shaped his entire life, a void he never quite managed to fill. "His loss," Marcus said simply. Rain continued to pound against the car, and the roadside ditches were rapidly filling with water. As they approached an intersection, Marcus saw the flashing lights of emergency vehicles ahead. A police cruiser blocked the main route to the hospital, its lights casting eerie blue patterns through the rain. An officer in a dripping raincoat approached as Marcus rolled down his window. "Roads flooded ahead," the officer shouted over the storm. "You'll need to take the detour. Follow the signs to Route 17. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Officer, I have a woman in labor here. We need to get to Memorial Hospital." The officer leaned down, peering past Marcus to Elena, who was in the midst of another contraction. His expression shifted from procedural to concerned. "Route 17 will add at least 20 minutes to your trip. There's a shortcut through Orchard Lane, but it's risky. The creek might have overflowed there." "I'll take my chances," Marcus decided. "Which way?" After receiving directions, Marcus accelerated carefully away from the blockade, making the turn onto a narrow country road lined with ancient oak trees that swayed menacingly in the wind. "Sorry about this detour," he said to Elena, who had grown increasingly pale. "How are you holding up?" "The contractions are about 5 minutes apart now," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Marcus, I don't think we're going to make it to the hospital in time." Fear gripped him. "Don't say that. We'll make it." But as they rounded a bend in the road, Marcus's headlights illuminated a terrifying sight. Water rushing across the pavement ahead, already at least a foot deep and rising fast. The creek had indeed overflowed its banks. He stopped the car, considering their options. Turning back would cost precious time, but attempting to cross could be catastrophic if the water was deeper than it appeared. "What's happening?" Elena asked, tensing as she spotted the floodwater. "The road's flooded," Marcus admitted. "I need to decide whether to try crossing or find another route." Elena let out a cry as another contraction hit, this one visibly more intense than the previous ones. When it subsided, she fixed Marcus with a determined gaze. "We don't have time to find another way. We have to cross." Marcus hesitated only briefly before nodding. He put the car in drive and inched forward, feeling the moment the tires made contact with the water. The car shuddered as the current pushed against it, but continued moving forward. Halfway across, the engine sputtered ominously. "No, no, no," Marcus muttered, pressing gently on the accelerator. "Come on." The engine coughed once, twice, then died completely. Water began seeping in through the door seams as the car settled slightly lower in the rising flood. Elena looked at Marcus with wide, terrified eyes. "What do we do now?" Making a split-second decision, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt. "We walk. The hospital isn't far from the other side of this stretch." He reached across to help Elena with her seatbelt. "I'll help you. We can make it." With the water rising around the car and the contractions coming stronger and faster, Marcus helped Elena out into the flood. Supporting her weight against his side, they waded through the knee-deep water toward the safety of higher ground, each step a battle against the current and time itself. By some miracle, they made it across just as flashing lights appeared on. The road ahead, an ambulance responding to another emergency had spotted them. As the paramedics rushed toward them, Elena's water broke, and Marcus knew they had cut it impossibly close. "You're going to be okay now," he told her as the paramedics took over, guiding her toward the ambulance. "Both of you are going to be okay." The fluorescent lights of Memorial Hospital's emergency department cast harsh shadows across the waiting room where Marcus sat, still in his rain-soaked clothes. Steam rose from the paper cup of vending machine coffee clutched in his trembling hands. He had no reason to stay. The paramedics had taken Elena directly to the maternity ward, and his responsibility had effectively ended when they arrived at the hospital. Yet something kept him rooted to the uncomfortable plastic chair, a sense of unfinished business he couldn't quite name. A clock on the wall ticked steadily past 2 in the morning. Marcus closed his eyes, exhaustion washing over him in waves. Images from his past flickered through his mind. His brother Tommy's face the day their father left, promising he'd come back soon. His mother working double shifts to keep food on the table. The day he'd found Tommy with a needle in his arm, making promises neither of them believed anymore. So many broken promises in his life. Maybe that's why he couldn't leave. He'd told Elena everything would be okay, and some irrational part of him needed to ensure that it was. "Excuse me, are you Marcus?" He looked up to find a nurse standing before him, her scrubs decorated with cartoonish animals. "Yes, that's me," he replied, straightening in his chair. "Elena's asking for you." The nurse smiled warmly. "She's been moved to the maternity ward, 3rd floor, room 312. Marcus hesitated. "Is that appropriate? I'm not family or anything." "We just met tonight." "She was quite insistent," the nurse replied with a knowing look that made Marcus wonder what Elena had told her about their encounter. "And considering what you did to get her here safely, I'd say you've earned the right to see how this story ends." Finding himself unable to argue, Marcus followed the nurse to the elevators and up to the 3rd floor. The maternity ward was surprisingly quiet at this hour, the halls empty save for an occasional staff member passing by with purposeful steps. Room 312's door stood slightly ajar. Marcus knocked gently before peering inside. Elena was propped up in bed, her dark hair now dried and pulled back from her face, which appeared both exhausted and radiant in the soft light. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. "You stayed," she said, genuine surprise in her voice. Marcus stepped into the room, suddenly self-conscious about his disheveled appearance. "I wanted to make sure you were both okay." "Come meet her," Elena said, adjusting the blanket to reveal a tiny face with eyes screwed shut and a button nose. "Lily Rose Porter, 6 pounds, 3 ounces. The doctor says she's perfectly healthy despite being a little early." Marcus approached cautiously, as if the newborn might startle at any sudden movement. Looking down at the sleeping infant, he felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. "She's beautiful," he said, the words inadequate for the strange mixture of emotions swirling through him. "They say if you hadn't gotten me here when you did." Elena's voice trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. "There were complications." The umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. If we'd been even 15 minutes later. She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of what might have happened settling over him. He thought of all the moments that had led to this one. The decision to work late, the storm that slowed his drive, the split-second choice to stop rather than drive past. I have no family here, Elena continued after a moment. Moved to start fresh after everything with Lily's father fell apart. My sister was supposed to come next week to help after the birth, but... You don't have to explain, Marcus said gently. I do, though. Elena's gaze was steady despite her exhaustion. Because I need to ask you something important, and it won't make sense unless you understand my situation. Marcus waited, a strange feeling of inevitability washing over him. They need an emergency contact for me and Lily, she said. Someone local. I know it's an enormous imposition after everything you've already done, but would you be willing to be listed? Just until my sister arrives next week and can take over? The request caught Marcus off guard. Me? But you don't even know me. I could be anyone. Elena's lips curved into a small smile. You're the man who stopped on a stormy night to help a stranger. The man who carried me through floodwater to save my baby. I think that tells me everything important I need to know about who you are, Marcus. He should say no. It was the sensible response. Their lives had intersected by chance, and continuing that connection made little sense. But looking at the tiny life wrapped in pink, Marcus found himself nodding. Just until your sister arrives, he agreed. And you should probably have my number, just in case. They exchanged contact information, and Marcus wrote his details on the hospital forms. As he prepared to leave, finally feeling the bone-deep exhaustion of the night's events, Elena called after him. Marcus, thank you for everything. He nodded, unable to articulate the strange feeling that this night had somehow altered something fundamental within him. As he walked out of the hospital into the now gentle rain of early morning, Marcus had no way of knowing that his involvement in Elena and Lily's lives was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Fall had painted the trees in fiery hues of orange and red when Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message one Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after the stormy night that had brought Elena and Lily into his life. He was on a scaffolding, securing a support beam for the new community center, when the vibration against his thigh pulled his attention momentarily away from his work. He'd exchanged a few messages with Elena in the weeks following Lily's birth, mostly brief updates about the baby's health and Elena's recovery. Then communication had gradually tapered off after her sister arrived to help. The last text he'd received was a photo of Lily at 3 months old, smiling, gummily at the camera with a simple message, "Your highway rescue is thriving." He'd smiled at the picture, replied with appropriate congratulations, and that had been it. Their brief connection had served its purpose, and life had moved on. Or so he'd thought. During his lunch break, Marcus finally pulled out his phone, wiping dusty hands on his jeans before checking the message. What he read made him straighten with concern. If anything happens to me, she needs someone good in her life. The spare key is under the blue flower pot. Please remember your promise. No greeting, no signature, but the sender was unmistakably Elena. Marcus read the message 3 times, a cold unease settling in his stomach. He tried calling the number immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. That evening, after his shift ended, Marcus sat in his truck staring at the address he'd saved in his contacts months ago. He debated with himself about the appropriate response. Call the police? But what would he say? A woman he barely knew had sent a cryptic text that might mean nothing at all? The sunset cast long shadows across the dashboard as Marcus weighed his options. In the months since that stormy night, something had changed in him. He'd started calling his mother weekly, had even attempted to locate Tommy through old connections, though without success. That night had reminded him that connections mattered, even the fleeting ones. Damn it, he muttered, starting the engine. 20 minutes later, He was pulling into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex on the edge of town. Pinewood Gardens was neither the worst nor the best of accommodations. A place for people making do, getting by on limited means, but with aspirations for something better. Apartment 12 was on the second floor facing the parking lot. Marcus climbed the metal stairs, his work boots making hollow sounds against the steps. He knocked firmly on the door, listening for any movement within. Nothing. After waiting several minutes and knocking once more, Marcus glanced around the small landing. A clay pot with a withered plant sat in the corner, blue, as Elena had described. Feeling conspicuous, he lifted it to find a single key taped to the bottom. Before he could decide whether to use it, the door to the neighboring apartment opened, revealing an elderly woman with curious eyes and a small dog tucked under her arm. "You looking for Elena?" she asked without preamble. Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a friend. Have you seen her recently?" The woman's expression shifted subtly. "Not since Friday. Left in quite a hurry, she did. Had the baby all bundled up and more bags than she could carry. Didn't say where she was going." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "But there was a man here asking about her yesterday. Not friendly-like, if you catch my meaning." A knot of worry tightened in Marcus's chest. "Did this man say who he was?" "Said he was her brother," the woman replied with obvious skepticism. "But I've met her sister, and there's no family resemblance there, if you know what I mean." Marcus thanked her for the information and, once she had retreated back into her apartment, used the key to unlock Elena's door. The apartment was small, but had been made homey with modest furnishings and touches of color. A playmat with infant toys lay in the center of the living room. Dishes were stacked neatly on a drying rack beside the sink. Everything looked ordinary, except for the half-empty cup of coffee on the counter and the open baby food jar with a spoon still sticking out of it. Signs of a hasty departure. He moved through the space carefully, feeling like an intruder despite the invitation implied. By the key? In the bedroom, the closet doors stood open, clothing pulled haphazardly from hangers. A crib against one wall was stripped of its bedding. Something wasn't right. The Elena he had met might have been in a desperate situation that night on the highway, but she had struck him as organized, thoughtful. This chaotic departure spoke of fear. As Marcus turned to leave, his foot caught on something partially hidden beneath the bed. Kneeling down, he discovered a plain manila envelope with his name written across the front in hurried handwriting. Inside was a handwritten letter and a smaller sealed envelope. Marcus unfolded the letter with fingers that had inexplicably begun to tremble. "Marcus, if you're reading this, it means I had to leave suddenly and couldn't reach you directly. I never properly thanked you for what you did that night, but now I need to ask for your help once more. Lily and I are in danger, and I have no one else to turn to. There are things about me, about Lily, that you don't know. Things I should have told you from the beginning, but I was afraid. That night on the highway wasn't an accident. I recognized your truck from the photo. I needed to find you. The smaller envelope contains information that will help you understand. Please, if you can find it in yourself to help us again, follow the instructions inside. If not, I understand. You owe us nothing, but please remember what you said that night, that everything would be okay. I'm holding on to that promise now more than ever." Elena Marcus stared at the letter, his mind racing to make sense of Elena's words. What did she mean? She had recognized his truck. What photo? With growing unease, he opened the smaller envelope to find a folded piece of paper containing an address and a single cryptic instruction. Ask for the book Lily's father left behind. Dawn broke over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold as Marcus's truck ate up the miles of rural highway. He'd barely slept after discovering Elena's letter, his mind churning with questions and half-formed theories. The address she had provided led to a small town called Millfield, nearly 3 hours away, far enough to hopefully escape whatever threat had sent her running. but close enough to reach in a single morning's drive. In the passenger seat lay Elena's journal, which he had found hidden beneath the loose floorboard mentioned in her second letter. The journal contained entries dating back over a year, many of them encrypted in a simple substitution cipher that had taken Marcus most of the night to decode. What he had discovered left him reeling. April 15th. Met T again today. He says his brother would never forgive him for the choices he's made, but he can't stop now. Too deep. He doesn't know I copied the photo from his wallet. They look so much alike. June 30th. T disappeared again. 3 weeks this time. Returned with bruises and wouldn't talk about it. Something's very wrong. He's scared, but won't admit it. August 12th. Told T about the baby today. He seemed happy at first, then panicked. Said they would use it against him. Said he had to go away to protect us. I don't understand what's happening. October 4th. T came back just long enough to give me a key and an address. Said if anything ever happened to him, I should find his brother. Said his brother was the only one who might help, despite everything between them. The entries continued, growing increasingly anxious in tone as Elena's pregnancy progressed. The final entry was dated just days before their encounter on the highway. Found M. Reed, construction worker, lives alone since divorce, drives the same model truck as the one in T's photo. I've been watching him for 3 days, trying to work up the courage to approach him. What if he turns me away? What if he's nothing like T described? Running out of options. They found my last place. Maybe the storm tomorrow will provide an opportunity. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. The implications were staggering. The broken-down car, the fortuitous timing. None of it had been coincidence. Elena had engineered their meeting, though her labor had genuinely begun earlier than expected. But why? What did she want from him specifically? And who was this mysterious T? A terrible suspicion had formed in Marcus's mind, one he could barely bring himself to consider. It had been years since he'd spoken to his younger brother Tommy. Their last conversation had devolved into a shouting match about Tommy's lifestyle choices, his involvement with people Marcus considered dangerous, family resemblance, the same model truck. Could T possibly be? He shook his head, focusing on the road ahead. Speculation without facts would get him nowhere. Millfield was just 20 minutes away now, according to the GPS. The town revealed itself gradually. A small collection of buildings clustered around a main street, with houses radiating outward like spokes from a wheel. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where strangers were noticed and remembered. Marcus felt conspicuous as he parked his truck in front of the address Elena had provided, a small bookstore called Turning Pages. A bell jangled cheerfully as he pushed open the door. The interior was warm and inviting, walls lined with bookshelves and comfortable reading nooks scattered throughout. An elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning." He greeted Marcus with a gentle smile. "Anything in particular you're looking for today?" Marcus cleared his throat, suddenly aware that he had no idea what he was getting himself into. "I'm looking for a book that was left behind, by Lily's father." The change in the man's demeanor was subtle but immediate. A slight stiffening of his posture, a cautious assessment in his gaze. "May I ask who sent you?" "Elena Porter," Marcus replied, watching closely for a reaction. The old man nodded slowly. "Follow me, please." He led Marcus through a doorway at the back of the store into a small office cluttered with papers and books. After locking the door behind them, he moved to a painting on the wall, a landscape of mountains and forest, and swung it aside to reveal a small safe. With practiced movements, he dialed the combination and retrieved a thick envelope. "Elena was here 3 days ago," he said, handing the envelope to Marcus. "She seemed afraid. kept looking over her shoulder. Asked me to give this to anyone who came asking with those exact words. He studied Marcus's face. You're him, aren't you? The brother? I'm not sure what you mean, Marcus replied carefully. The old man smiled sadly. The resemblance is remarkable. Tommy spoke of you often when he visited. He regretted how things ended between you. Marcus felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. You know my brother? Knew, the man corrected gently. He hasn't been back in over a year. Not since he got involved with those people from the city. He shook his head. Elena left a message for you as well. Said if it really was you who came, to tell you she's heading to the place where summers never ended. She said you'd understand if you were who she hoped you were. Marcus didn't understand. Not yet. But he nodded anyway. Thank you. Be careful, the old man said as he escorted Marcus back to the front of the store. The man who came looking for her yesterday wasn't as polite as you, asked too many questions about her and the baby. Outside, Marcus sat in his truck and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a collection of documents, some photos, several handwritten letters, and what appeared to be official records. One photo in particular made his breath catch. Tommy, his arm around a smiling Elena, both looking carefree and happy in what appeared to be the early days of their relationship. As Marcus sifted through the materials, a narrative began to take shape. Tommy had gotten involved with people who used his mechanical skills for modifying vehicles, cars used in criminal activities. When he'd tried to extricate himself after learning about Elena's pregnancy, they'd threatened both him and his unborn child. The documents included ledgers, license plate numbers, dates and locations, evidence that could be used against the organization. The final item in the envelope was a recent photo of Tommy, looking thinner and more haggard than Marcus remembered, holding newborn Lily in what appeared to be a hospital room. On the back, in Tommy's familiar scrawl, "She has our mother's eyes. Keep them safe, big brother. I'm sorry for everything." Marcus was so absorbed in the contents of the envelope that he didn't immediately notice the black sedan that had pulled up across the street, or the man watching him through its tinted windows. It was only when he started his truck and pulled away from the curb that he spotted the vehicle falling into place behind him, maintaining a careful distance as it followed him out of town. The chase had begun, and Marcus had no idea where to find Elena and Lily. Only a cryptic clue about the place where summers never ended, and the growing certainty that his estranged brother's past had finally caught up with all of them. The weathered sign for Lakeview Cabins stood half-hidden among overgrown bushes, its once bright paint faded by years of sun and neglect. Marcus slowed his truck, eyes scanning the narrow dirt road that wound through pine trees toward a glittering expanse of water visible in the distance. He had managed to lose the black sedan 2 towns back through a series of abrupt turns and back roads, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. The place where summers never ended, he murmured to himself, remembering childhood vacations. At this very lake, he and Tommy spending endless days swimming, fishing, and exploring the surrounding forest. Their grandfather had owned a cabin here before his passing, the last place where their family had been truly happy together, before their father left, before everything fell apart. Marcus hadn't been back in over 15 years. He wasn't even sure if the property was still in the family. Their mother had mentioned something about selling it to pay for Tommy's 3rd stint in rehab, but he couldn't remember if the sale had gone through. The cabins were scattered along the lake shore, most of them appearing vacant this late in the season. Marcus drove slowly, scanning each one until he spotted a familiar blue structure partially hidden by pine trees, his grandfather's cabin, distinguished by its unique hexagonal porch that extended over the water. A curl of smoke rose from the chimney. Marcus parked some distance away and approached on foot, moving quietly through the trees. He didn't know what to expect, Elena and Lily hopefully, but possibly the men who had been following them. Or worse, nobody at all, another dead end. Through gaps in the curtained windows, he could see movement inside. A figure passed by, a woman carrying something in her arms. Relief washed over him as he recognized Elena's profile. He stepped from the tree line and approached the front door, knocking softly. The door opened a crack, then wider as Elena recognized him. Her face was pale with exhaustion, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes, but she managed a smile of such genuine relief that it made Marcus's chest tighten. "You figured it out," she whispered, stepping back to let him inside. The cabin was much as he remembered it, though shabbier, the furniture worn, the floorboards creaking underfoot. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the walls. In a portable crib near the warmth, Lily slept peacefully, her tiny fists curled beside her face. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Elena said, closing and locking the door behind him. "Or that you'd understand the message." "I almost didn't," Marcus admitted, removing his jacket. "But once I knew Tommy was involved—" He hesitated, the question he'd been dreading to ask finally materializing. "Where is he, Elena? What's really going on?" Elena motioned for him to sit at the small kitchen table. She poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot, keeping warm on the wood stove, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know exactly where Tommy is right now," she began, her voice low to avoid waking the baby. "He contacts me when he can, but it's not safe for him to stay in one place too long. The people he worked for, they're dangerous, Marcus. More dangerous than you can imagine." "What did he do?" Marcus asked, though the documentation he'd found had already painted a clear picture. He modified cars for them, enhanced engines, hidden compartments. He didn't ask questions about what the vehicles were used for, but he knew. She paused, gathering herself. "When he found out I was pregnant, he wanted out, tried to walk away clean. But they don't let people walk away." Marcus nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "And the men following you?" "They think Tommy kept records, names, dates, locations, insurance, he called it." Her eyes flickered toward the sleeping baby. "When Lily was born, everything changed for him. He started gathering evidence, planning to take it to the authorities in exchange for protection for us." She looked directly at Marcus. "That's what they're after. That's why we had to run." "But why me?" Marcus asked, the question that had been gnawing at him since he'd found Elena's letter. "Why did you come looking for me that night?" Elena reached across the table and took his hand, her touch hesitant. "Because Tommy said you were the only person he trusted completely. He said you were the strongest, most honorable man he knew, despite everything that happened between you." Marcus felt his throat constrict, emotions he'd buried years ago threatening to surface. "We haven't spoken in almost a decade." "I know," Elena said gently. "He told me about the fight, about the things that were said, but he also told me that when you were boys, you once jumped into the lake to save him when he fell through thin ice. That you nearly drowned yourself pulling him out. He said that's who you really are. Someone who would risk everything to save someone you love." The memory hit Marcus with unexpected force. The crack of ice, Tommy's terrified face disappearing beneath the surface, the shocking cold as Marcus dove in after him. He'd never considered it remarkable. It was simply what needed to be done. "When I saw your truck that night," Elena continued. "When I confirmed it was you, based on Tommy's description, I knew I needed to make contact. The car really did break down. That wasn't planned. And the labor was real, too. Early, but real." She smiled faintly. "Lily seems to have her father's sense of timing." Marcus looked over at the sleeping infant, truly seeing her for the first time with the knowledge that she was his niece, his brother's daughter, family. "There's something else you need to know," Elena said, her expression growing serious. "Tommy managed to send me a message yesterday. He's arranged a meeting with the federal authorities. He's going to turn himself in, along with the evidence. She swallowed hard. But he wants to see Lily first. He wants to say goodbye in case... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. When? Marcus asked. Tomorrow, noon, at the north end of the lake, where the old boathouse stands. Marcus nodded, his decision already made. Whatever had happened between him and Tommy belonged to the past. What mattered now was keeping his brother's family safe. His family, too. Get some rest, he told Elena. I'll keep watch tonight. As Elena retired to the small bedroom with Lily, Marcus sat by the window, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake's surface. On the table beside him lay the photo of Tommy holding newborn Lily, a tangible reminder of all that was at stake. For the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to hope that he might see his brother again. Not across a courtroom or through a prison visiting room window, but face to face as family. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. Outside, the wind whispered through pine branches, a sound that had once been the soundtrack to their childhood summers. Marcus settled in for a long night, his resolve hardening with each passing hour. Whatever came tomorrow, he would be ready. Morning arrived with a heavy fog that clung to the lake's surface, transforming the familiar landscape into something ethereal and uncertain. Marcus stood on the cabin's porch, watching as tendrils of mist wrapped around tree trunks and softened the contours of the distant shore, the perfect cover for a clandestine meeting or an ambush. Inside the cabin, Elena moved quietly about the small kitchen, preparing a bottle for Lily, who had woken at dawn. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken concerns, plans reviewed and contingencies considered throughout the night hours. Marcus checked his watch. 9:15, less than 3 hours until the scheduled meeting with Tommy. His stomach knotted with anticipation and dread in equal measure. A decade of silence, of hurt and anger and regret, all coming to a head on this foggy morning by the lake of their childhood. I've been thinking, Marcus said, stepping back inside and closing the door against the chill. You and Lily should stay here while I meet Tommy. Elena shook her head firmly, testing the temperature of the formula on her wrist. He needs to see her. This might be his only chance. It's too dangerous, Marcus countered, lowering his voice as Lily began to fuss. If something goes wrong, something already went wrong, Elena interrupted, her voice strained but determined. It went wrong the day Tommy got involved with these people. It went wrong when he chose to protect us by gathering evidence instead of simply running. We've been living with danger for months, Marcus. At least this way, there's a chance it ends. Today. She lifted Lily from the portable crib, cradling her with practiced ease as she offered the bottle. The baby latched on immediately, tiny hands coming up to rest against the warm plastic. Marcus watched the simple interaction, struck by the fierce protectiveness evident in Elena's every movement. She wasn't just Tommy's girlfriend or Lily's mother. She was a woman who had engineered an encounter on a stormy highway, who had followed cryptic clues and evaded pursuers, all to secure a future for her child. He recognized in her the same determination his mother had shown after their father left, the uncompromising resolve to ensure her child had what she needed. All right, he conceded. But we do this my way. I go ahead, make sure it's safe. You follow with Lily, but stay back until I signal. And at the first sign of trouble, you get her out of there. No hesitation. Elena nodded, her expression softening. Slightly. Thank you. For understanding. For helping us. They spent the next hour preparing, gathering the few belongings Elena had brought, ensuring Lily was fed and comfortable, planning their approach to the old boathouse. Marcus found himself repeatedly reaching for his phone, though he knew there was no one to call for backup. This was family business, complicated by criminal entanglements and years of estrangement. At 11:30, they set out, Marcus leading the way along an overgrown path that wound through the woods parallel to the lakeshore. Elena followed 20 paces behind, Lily secured against her chest in a carrier, covered with a light blanket against the morning chill. The fog had begun to lift, but still provided valuable concealment as they navigated the familiar terrain. The old boathouse emerged from the mist like a spectral structure. Weathered gray boards, a sagging roof, and a small dock extending into the lake where their grandfather had once moored his fishing boat. Marcus raised a hand, signaling Elena to wait as he moved forward alone, every sense alert for danger. The boathouse door stood partially open. Marcus approached cautiously, wishing, for the first time, that he'd thought to bring some kind of weapon. The hinges creaked as he pushed the door wider, stepping into the dimly lit interior. A figure sat hunched on an overturned crate, head bowed, hands clasped between his knees. At the sound of Marcus's entrance, the man looked up, and two sets of identical brown eyes met across the dusty space. Tommy looked older than his 34 years, his face gaunt and lined, his once thick hair now thinning at the temples. But the crooked smile that spread across his features was achingly familiar. The same smile that had charmed teachers into extending deadlines and girlfriends into forgiveness. "Marcus," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You came." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak, the weight of their shared history crushing the air from his lungs. The anger he'd carried for so long seemed suddenly insignificant against the reality of his brother sitting before him, alive, but clearly suffering. "You look like hell," Marcus finally managed, his own voice unsteady. Tommy's laugh was brief, but genuine. "Yeah, well, been living that way too." He stood, and Marcus was struck by how much thinner his brother was, how his shoulders hunched as if under an invisible burden. "I wasn't sure you'd help them. After everything." "Their family," Marcus said simply. Then, after a beat, "Your family." The words hung in the air between them, bridging years of silence. Tommy's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I really messed up, Marcus. Got in too deep, thought I could handle it." He shook his head ruefully. "Same old story, right? Tommy the screw-up?" "That's not why I'm here," Marcus said. "Where's the evidence you gathered? Elena said you were meeting with federal agents today." Tommy nodded, reaching inside his jacket to withdraw a small waterproof case. "It's all here. Bank records, locations, names. Enough to bring down the entire operation." He paused, swallowing hard. "The feds agreed to witness protection for Elena and Lily. New identities, new start." "And you?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Reduced sentence. Still looking at 5 to 7 years. Tommy's expression hardened. "Worth it, to know they'll be safe." A sound from outside drew both men's attention, the whisper of movement beyond the boathouse door. Marcus tensed, but relaxed when Elena stepped into view, Lily bundled securely against her chest. The transformation in Tommy was immediate and profound. His entire body seemed to orient toward his daughter, his expression softening into something Marcus had never seen before, pure, unguarded love. "Is it safe?" Elena asked, her eyes darting between the brothers. Marcus nodded, and she crossed the distance to Tommy, who reached out with trembling hands to touch his daughter's face. Lily, disturbed from her drowsy state, blinked up at him with curious eyes. "She's perfect," Tommy whispered, a tear finally escaping to trace a path down his weathered cheek. "You've done amazing, keeping her safe." Elena leaned into him, their foreheads touching briefly over their daughter's head. A family united for what might be the last time. The peaceful moment shattered as the door to the boathouse burst open, revealing two men in dark clothes, guns, raised. "How touching," said the taller of the two, his voice cold and precise. "The Reed family reunion." Marcus stepped instinctively in front of Elena and Lily, while Tommy straightened, his face hardening into a mask of defiance. "You're too late, Daniel," Tommy said. The evidence has already been handed over. There are federal agents on their way right now. The man called Daniel smiled thinly. A convincing bluff, but I've been watching this place since dawn. No one's come or gone except you three. His gaze shifted to Marcus. And who might this be? Another loose end to tie up? He's nobody, Tommy said quickly. Just a ride. He doesn't know anything. I'm his brother, Marcus corrected, meeting Daniel's calculating gaze directly. And I know everything. The tension in the boathouse ratcheted higher as Daniel assessed this new information. His companion shifted nervously, his gun drifting. Between targets. The case, Tommy, Daniel said, extending his free hand. Now, or we start with the girl. The threat hung in the air, electric with possibility. Marcus felt, rather than saw Tommy's decision in the subtle shift of his stance, the almost imperceptible nod in his direction. In that moment, the bond between them, frayed by time and distance but never fully broken, reasserted itself with startling clarity. Without words, Marcus understood what his brother needed from him. Wait, Marcus said, drawing Daniel's attention. I have what you want. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, as if retrieving the case Tommy had shown him earlier. Daniel's eyes followed the movement, his guard momentarily lowered. It was all the opening Tommy needed. With a sudden lunge, he tackled the second. Gunman, sending them both crashing into the weathered wall of the boathouse. Daniel swung his weapon toward Tommy, and Marcus launched himself forward, grappling for control of the gun. The ensuing struggle was brutally brief. Marcus's years of construction work had given him strength that Daniel's slimmer frame couldn't match. He twisted the gun away, sending it skidding across the wooden floor toward Elena, who grabbed it with surprising confidence. As Marcus subdued Daniel, pinning him face down with a knee in his back, he heard Tommy's voice, strained but triumphant. Now, what were you saying about federal agents? The sound of approaching sirens filtered through the morning air, growing steadily louder. Daniel went still beneath Marcus, resignation replacing resistance. Only then did Marcus look up to see Tommy leaning heavily against the wall, one hand pressed to his side where a dark stain was spreading across his shirt. Tommy! Elena cried, rushing to him while still holding the gun trained on the subdued second man. It's fine, Tommy gasped, though his pallor suggested otherwise. Just a scratch. Marcus secured Daniel with rope found in the boathouse before moving to his brother's side. The wound was bad, a knife slash that had caught him just below the ribs, but survivable if treated quickly. Always had to be the hero, Marcus muttered as he applied pressure to the wound. Some things never change. Tommy grinned weakly up at him. Learn from the best. Remember that time at the lake, when I fell through the ice? Outside, car doors slammed, and authoritative voices called out commands. The federal agents had arrived, just as Tommy had promised. I remember, Marcus said, softly. I remember everything. As the agents swarmed the boathouse, securing the scene and calling for medical assistance, Marcus kept his hand firmly pressed against his brother's wound, a physical connection that mirrored the emotional one, being rebuilt between them. Elena held Lily close, the baby remarkably calm despite the chaos surrounding her, as if she somehow understood that the danger was finally passing. Against all odds, they had made it through, wounded but alive, separated for years but reconnected, in crisis. As the paramedics worked to stabilize Tommy, he clutched Marcus's hand with surprising strength. Take care of them, he whispered. Until I can. Marcus nodded, a promise in the gesture that required no words. Some bridges, once thought burned beyond repair, could still be rebuilt, stronger perhaps for having been broken and mended. The lakeside was transformed by autumn's full glory, maple and oak trees ablaze with color against the backdrop of evergreens. A year had passed since the confrontation at the boathouse, a year of healing, of rebuilding, of finding new patterns in the shifted landscape of their lives. Marcus sat on the newly reconstructed dock behind his grandfather's cabin, a fishing pole propped casually against the railing beside him. The property had been in foreclosure when he'd tracked down the current owner, a bank that was eager to offload the remote cabin for a surprisingly reasonable price. 6 months of weekends spent repairing the roof, replacing rotted boards, and updating the ancient plumbing had transformed the neglected structure into a comfortable retreat. Behind him, the sound of childish laughter floated through the open windows. Lily, now 18 months old, had grown into a curious toddler with Tommy's mischievous smile and Elena's thoughtful eyes. She toddled around the cabin with determined energy, exploring every corner of her weekend home. The screen door creaked open, and Elena stepped onto the porch, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. She had changed too over the past year, the watchful tension in her shoulders gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. The Federal Witness Protection Program had been deemed unnecessary after the trial resulted in the dismantling of the entire criminal network. With all the principal threats behind bars, Elena and Lily had been able to build their life openly, without hiding. She finally went down for her nap, Elena said, handing Marcus one of the mugs as she settled into the adjacent chair. Your brother swears she never fights sleep like this at home. Marcus smiled, taking a grateful sip of the coffee. Tommy always was a terrible liar. They sat in comfortable silence, watching a pair of loons glide across the lake's surface. The peaceful moment was something Marcus had come to treasure during these weekend gatherings, a pause in the rhythm of their busy lives, a chance to appreciate how far they had all come. Tommy's sentence had been reduced to 3 years in recognition of his cooperation and the risk he had taken in helping bring down the organization. With good behavior, he would be eligible for parole in another 14 months. His recovery from the knife wound had been slow but complete, leaving only a scar to commemorate the day the Reed family had found its way back to each other. Mail. Came while you were fishing, Elena said, reaching into her pocket to withdraw an envelope. From Tommy. Marcus took it, recognizing his brother's handwriting immediately. The weekly letters had become a ritual, a bridge across the physical distance between them. This one bore yesterday's postmark from the minimum security facility where Tommy was serving his time. He opened it carefully, unfolding several pages covered in Tommy's increasingly neat handwriting, a result of the college courses he was taking. Behind bars. Marcus Fall always makes me think of the lake. Is it beautiful there now? In my mind, the trees are every shade of red and gold, and the water is that deep blue that only happens in October. I bet Lily loves the leaves. Elena says she's collecting them for a project you're helping her with. Had my parole hearing date confirmed this week, May 15th next year. The counselor says my chances are excellent. I've been thinking about what comes after. Remember how we used to talk about opening a restoration garage when we were kids? Working on classic cars, bringing them back to life? I think I'd like to revisit that dream if you're still interested. There's something else I've been meaning to tell you. Something I couldn't find the right words for until now. That day at the lake, when you pulled me from the ice, I never forgot it. Even during the worst years when I was making every mistake possible, I held on to that memory. My big brother, diving into danger without hesitation to save me. It gave me hope that something in me was worth saving. When I met Elena, when I found out about Lily, I finally understood what you did that day. Love makes us brave. It makes us better than we are alone. I wasn't brave enough at first. Tried to run, tried to hide. But in the end, I wanted to be the kind of man who would dive through the ice. The kind of man my daughter could be proud of someday. Thank you for being there when it mattered most. For all of us. Your brother? Tommy Marcus refolded the letter, blinking away the unexpected moisture in his eyes. The old hurts had faded over time, replaced by a deeper understanding of his brother's struggles and strengths. They were both works, in progress, learning to be the men their younger selves had once imagined becoming. Good news? Elena asked, observing the shift in his expression. Parole hearing date is confirmed, Marcus replied. Next May. Elena smiled, her relief evident. Lily will be 2 by then, old enough to really know her father. The sound of a car coming up the gravel driveway interrupted their conversation. Marcus stood, recognizing the familiar rumble of his mother's SUV. At 72, Beth Reed was still fiercely independent, driving the 3 hours to the lake whenever her schedule allowed. The monthly family gatherings had been her idea, a way to ensure Lily grew up knowing her grandmother, a way to keep their slowly healing family connected. As Marcus walked around the cabin to greet his mother, he noticed a stranded car on the Psi rural road leading to the property. The driver, a young woman, was standing beside it looking distressed. Without hesitation, Marcus changed direction, heading toward the stranger in need of assistance. Some lessons, once learned, became second nature. The simple act of stopping to help had altered the course of his life once before, had led him back to his brother, had given him the family he now cherished. The circle had completed itself in ways he could never have imagined on that stormy night 18 months ago. Car trouble? He called as he approached the woman. She looked up, relief crossing her features. It just died on me. I'm not familiar with these roads. Was hoping to find a phone to call for help. I can take a look, Marcus offered. And we've got a phone at the cabin if you need it. As he checked under the hood, diagnosing a simple loose connection that was quickly fixed, Marcus thought about the peculiar geometry of life, how moments of crisis often contain the seeds of transformation, how strangers could become family, in the span of a heartbeat. Later that evening, with Lily asleep in the small bedroom that had once been his and Tommy's, with his mother and Elena exchanging recipes in the kitchen, Marcus returned to the dock alone. The lake spread before him, a mirror reflecting the vast canopy of stars above. He thought of Tommy's letter, of ice cracking beneath childish feet, of the instinctive plunge into freezing water. Love makes us brave. It makes us better than we are alone. He had stopped for a stranger on a stormy night, never imagining that simple act would lead him home to the family he thought he had lost forever. Somewhere in the darkness, a loon called out, a haunting, beautiful sound that seemed to contain all the mystery and promise of the future waiting to unfold before them. In the distance, the lights of the cabin glowed warmly, a beacon in the gathering darkness. Marcus stood at the edge of the dock for a moment longer, then turned and walked toward the light, toward the sound of gentle laughter drifting on the evening breeze, toward the love that had made him brave when it mattered most. The cycle would continue, moments of crisis followed by choices that revealed character, strangers becoming family, wounds healing into scars that told stories of survival rather than loss. It was, Marcus reflected as he climbed the steps to the porch, the most profound paradox of human existence, that our deepest connections often began with a simple decision to stop, to help, to care when it would have been easier to pass by. Inside the cabin, his family waited, and this time Marcus knew exactly where he belonged.